So,
Hello. There's 5 people, one behind the camera, one person's on FaceTime because they couldn't come in person. Are we good? Alright. I like money. You like money. I like not dying. You like not dying. Why can we expect these things in our workplaces? Because of old negotiations and regulations. In the US, child labor, 12-plus hour working days, unsafe work, and low wages used to be the norm. Could you imagine a life like that? The way we got to where we are today is with collectivizing and unionization. Unionization allowed America to become one of the best places to live and work, and influenced many early laws about workplace standards. I've been part of the unionized workforce before, and in my time it has encouraged me to share with you the history and views of how they became the unions that they are now. So, I would like to share with you a brief history of unions, some misconceptions, and a way people start unions today. Go ahead. So, where did unions and collectivized labor start in the United States? Historically, unions were a response to workers being mistreated by wealthy, self-interested bosses, and gradually evolved from occasionally mass protests into the more civilized discussions that they are now. In the post-industrial revolution, working conditions were often terrible for many workers. According to an article by Bart Jackson, 12-hour work days were the norm. Men made about $8 a week, women about half of that, and children even half of that. And that is to say, yes, children were working back then. Although, during this time, unions were beginning to form. A controversial union formed in 1794, and about a decade later, like you might expect, they got charged under a law with criminal conspiracy. But during the late 19th century, unions got bigger. A union of 250,000 people on the Pullman Railroad line started to have its first major strike in the late 19th century, bringing in federal troops. As violence grew, it eventually came to a point where the National Labor Relations Act was passed. According to History.com, the Great Depression and popular support let unions finally get an in to pass legislation. So, under FDR, the National Labor Relations Act was passed, meaning that labor organization, minimum wage, better regulations, regulated work hours, and an end to child labor was finally put into law. Slowly, though, union membership began to decline. Unionization rates fell gradually through the 20th century, with cheaper and easier ways to produce with non-unionized labor instead. And deregulation started occurring, especially under Reagan. This brought a 20% unionization rate down to 10% from the 70s to now, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And as unions continue to shrink, more and more misconceptions about them start to form. Many misconceptions have formed over time, and they usually can get struck down right away. And if a list from the Industrial Union of Engineers include a few of the common ones. For example, unions are not outside interest groups, as might be a misconception. They are made up of workers for the workers, and their actions are voted on by workers. Unions aren't just in it for your dues. They use that money to fund getting better negotiations, and the difference is usually made up by the higher wages that you make. Union bosses aren't all corrupt. For every one boss that you might see in media, there are 1,000 union bosses that you've never even heard of before. And unions are still useful in the current day. They are needed to stay equal footing with the employers, and on average, a unionized worker will make about 25% more money. So, how do unions start? According to a step-by-step guide put out by the United Food and Commercial Workers International Union, it's actually pretty simple. First, you want to talk to your coworkers. A union is a union of workers, so you want to make sure that all of them are on your side. They're not, you have to convince them over to your side. Next, a good thing to do would be to talk to a union organizer. Usually, unions can have small laws or things you need to do that might not be explicitly clear, so a lot of unions have people who are meant specifically for getting other workplaces into those unions, and they're called union organizers. After that, you'll probably have to sign union cards. Union cards are essentially a petition that is signed by workers, just the standard way that unions are usually formed. And after you get enough of these signatures on these union cards, you go ahead and go to the employer and you tell them, hey, we got a union. And at this time, the employer can either say, all right, let's begin negotiating, or they can challenge it, and instead the union will have a vote, and the majority of workers vote in favor of the union, then a union will start. So to wrap this up, I think it's interesting to see the way that our modern standards have evolved from early brutal workplace conditions via these unions, and how people still involve themselves with unions today. Though often filled with misconceptions due to capitalists' propaganda, it can be useful to see unionizing as something that is still relevant today. They certainly aren't perfect, but they have helped shape this country for the better. We did it!
Yay!
Good job, brother. Now show everyone again, Mom.
Okay.
It's, I guess, some standard for education in Illinois. You gotta do this.
All right.
Excellent. Great speech.
Union all the way.